Welcome everyone to the People Uncommon Pod second edition. If you haven't checked out our first edition, it's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and had a fantastic conversation last time. Just as excited with the group that we have today. I think 4 people from, again, very, very different walks of life. But I think it's going to lead to a really, really interesting conversation once again. If you didn't check out our first one, basically the way that this will go is each of us will give a quick intro on a few different things that we like to talk about on these uncommon pods. And then after that, we'll basically let the conversation flow. I can always jump in and ask more specific questions, but I've encouraged our participants to sort of jot down something that they would ask everyone else about as we all give our introductions. And I think things will flow pretty naturally from there. So without further ado, I will go ahead and go first. My name is Sergio, of course. I have worked in sports analytics up to this point. My background is originally from Colombia. Both my parents are from there. I was born in Ecuador and have lived in the US for most of my life. So I actually have 3 passports, going on 4 with a Portuguese one, but that's a little bit off topic. Grew up in Texas, went to school in Texas for data science and sport management. And my career, as I said at the beginning, has been mostly in sports analytics. So if you know the movie Moneyball, you've seen the way that data and analytics is starting to shape sports more and more. That is what I've done with my career up to this point. But with People and launching this business about, investing in our friendships and connecting more authentically, certainly taking a step away from sports in that sense. But really enjoying it so far. And I think the last thing to touch on is just skills, interests, and hobbies. So in that sense, travel has been my number one kind of hobby and interest. Absolutely love seeing the world and going as many places as I can, learning from new cultures, learning from new perspectives. And other than that, I have lived in Colorado for the last 3 years. So everything to do with the outdoors and skiing, hiking, camping, backpacking, all of those activities has become a big part of my life. So that's my intro, and I will open it up to Alexa.
Okay. So my name's Alexa. I'm originally from a really small town in Canada. My province is called Alberta. So I grew up basically in the middle of nowhere. And basically, I would just consider myself Canadian. I feel like my cultural background is just a mix of everywhere, basically in Europe. So I would just refer to myself as Canadian. I'm currently studying my bachelor's of education, and I'm focusing in English as a second language. And currently, I'm an English tutor. I help people practice their English, mostly online. I have a couple in-person students here in Costa Rica. I'm a huge traveler. I've spent probably the last 3.5 years traveling on and off. And now I've finally settled down in Costa Rica, which of course isn't Canada. So I feel like I'm still traveling even though I'm living here now. I'm recently been getting into surfing as well. I guess that's something I'm really interested in right now. But yeah, basically I'm just living in Costa Rica and working and studying and going to the beach every day. And that's basically my life at the moment. Thomas?
So, hello guys, my name is Thomas. I'm originally from Belgium, from Brussels. So, it's supposedly to be the capital of Europe, but it's quite a middle big town, like 2 million people. I speak French originally, so sorry about my accent, but I speak also 5 other languages. So, I'm really good with languages because I've lived in South America, I lived in Spain, I lived in Thailand, and now I live in Malta, which is like a European island. I will say my background of education, even though it's useless now. It's a master of tourism and business management. But later on, I did a lot of marketing, and I would say that it's still my main skills. But I own also now business like a big martial arts center, which is also one of my hobby. I will explain about it. And we have also a yoga studio with my girlfriend. Um, no, yeah, hobby wise, I travel a lot, but I'm also like a BJJ black belt. So I study like a lot of martial arts. As I was living in Thailand, I did Muay Thai. I have 16 years of Jiu-Jitsu, of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the ground. I boxed, I wrestle. Yeah, that's it. I love to travel. I travel a lot. And yeah, right now I'm going to go in Belgium for Christmas. I'm going to go in Iceland. Well, it's not the perfect timing because there is a volcano and some ice storm. So
Ice
that's it.
storm.
Yeah. And my background, I will say, in Brussels, especially in Europe, we are all mixed up. So I'm like French, Polish, Spanish, uh, a lot of different origin. But I just consider myself, let's say, Belgian. But I'm not a patriotic either. I'm not proud of that. If it would sound cliche, I would say I'm a citizen of the world, but I will never say that. And that's it, Shruthi. You can introduce yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Shruthi. I currently live in New York City. But was born and raised in Texas. Culturally, my family's from India, so I'm pretty much fully Indian American on both sides of my family. But yeah, my family still lives in Texas. I've lived I've lived in Texas. I've lived in California. I've lived in New York, but I've also lived in the UK and in Norway. I also spent like a lot of time in Germany over the years. So yeah, I spent quite a bit of time elsewhere, but have made New York my home for the past 4.5 years. In terms of my education background, I went to school in Texas. I studied cognitive science and human computer interaction. So was really fascinated by this idea of how people interact with technology, but then also how like technology impacts humans in society. So that really took me into what my profession is, which is I've largely been working in AI ethics and safety. And so just really thinking really critically about how is technology going to change the way humans interact and live in the world today? And then what are the risks to that? And how can we make sure that the use of technology benefits people for the good, and kind of ensuring that we're not exacerbating discrimination, making sure that we're ensuring fairness in these systems, and that we're still contributing to more like equitable society. But in terms of my skills, interests, and hobbies, I'm very passionate about political and community organizing. So I help run a community food pantry here in New York City. So we rescue food from local businesses and redistribute it to folks free of charge. I also took this past year off from AI ethics to go join a political campaign, just full time. Wanted to try what that was like, and that was really fun, and I learned a lot. But yeah, those are the things that I do in my free time. I also used to do a lot of martial arts, Thomas, which is kind of cool. Not anymore though, so you're definitely the expert. But used to be really into Shaolin, Southern and Northern style Kung Fu. But yeah, I think that's about it.
That's about it. Just casually dropping in that you used to do a lot of kung fu. That's amazing. That's amazing. I would love to open it up to the rest of you guys if there's a kind of burning question from the intros that you would like to ask.
I'd love to ask Alexa. So what brought you to Costa Rica specifically?
So basically 4 years ago, I had a goal to basically go through all the Americas. This was my plan. Like I wanted to start in Mexico and go all the way down to Argentina. But I had this big dream of backpacking all of the Americas. So I started in Mexico, and I only made it to Guatemala because I realized that like I don't travel fast and I cannot travel all of the Americas in 6 months, and it's very unrealistic for me. So after this big trip I did, I stayed in Mexico and Guatemala for like 6 months. I went home to Canada and I was like, wow, I hate it here. I don't want to be here anymore. I feel like I've grown as a person so much after being away. So basically, I saved up money again. I went to Colombia, but I always had like this stereotype of Costa Rica. I mean, it is expensive. So it is in the center of Central America, but it's not the same prices as maybe Nicaragua or Panama or Guatemala. So that kind of deterred me a little bit because I thought like, I don't want to go there. It's going to be like too touristy. I'm not going to like it. I'm going to hate Costa Rica. I was seeing a lot of like TikToks, Instagrams. I was like, I'm just going to skip it. This country is not necessary. And then I was in Bogota, and I don't know if you guys have been to Bogota at all in Colombia, but there's this giant club with like, I don't know, it's called Teatron, and there's
Yeah,
like
oh yeah.
there's like a million clubs in this club. I don't know, it's like one of the largest clubs in South America, I believe. So I'm at this club, and there's these guys at the coat check. And it is like an LGBTQ club, so like most of the men there are gay. So I mean, maybe as like a woman, it was like a little bit more comfortable. But I ended up meeting these two Costa Ricans, and they were like, you should come to Costa Rica. We live in this super cool beach town. It'd be super nice. When you're done in Colombia, you should come here. I ended up coming to Costa Rica, and I was like, wow, I love it here. I love how like there's a lot of little beach towns that are really relaxed. There's lots of surf. There's lots of nature. I also love like the sense of security that I feel here. Because like Latin American countries, of course, like unfortunately, there's like a lot of insecurity at some times. But here I feel like it's a little bit better. So that's kind of what I liked about Costa Rica. And then basically I had been coming back and forth from here because I met my now current boyfriend as well. So this is kind of alluding to why I also came here. But I ended up getting a job in April. I was kind of looking around online for teaching positions in Latin America, and one popped up here in Costa Rica. It was in a small beach town, so I took it. But yeah, that's why I'm in Costa Rica. That's kind of
cool.
why I'm here and the whole story of how I got here. But at first, like, I thought Costa Rica was going to be a terrible place, and now I'm so yeah.
I love that. It's fun.
Yeah, I also want to just jump in and say like the coolest part to me is the way that, perceptions can change so drastically, right? Like you can have a certain initial idea of what a place is going to be, but then for you it was the huge difference of like meeting someone that was from there and that could give you a whole different perspective on it. And that's what I try to do with Colombia all the time is people that haven't traveled to South or Central America oftentimes are going to have very different perceptions of Colombia and what it's going to feel like and what it's going to be like. So I try to be a billboard. I'm wearing a Colombian soccer jersey right now.
I lived in Guatemala, and a lot of people, they tend to tell you that it's dangerous, poor, extra. But I had like a blast of a lifetime there. So, and people are too nice, especially when you try to speak the language. It's just they are too nice.
Exactly. And some people are just going to be listening to this, but for those that are watching and seeing our faces, like Alexa, you're a blonde girl that everyone is going to paint as probably American or Canadian or European, right? And Thomas, you absolutely look kind of Aryan and European or American Canadian as well. So I think that speaks even more to both of y'all having tremendous experiences in Latin America, and how, it doesn't always end up, or often, most of the time, it doesn't end up like the kind of worst stories that you hear, the perceptions that you get.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Like, I feel like, yeah, people definitely, they make it seem like worse than it is. Like they make it seem like you go there, all these bad things are going to happen. But honestly, after traveling for like I guess 3 years around Latin America, also I went super young. Like I know I'm only like 22, almost 23 now, but when I went, I was 19. And like I said, I moved out of my mom's house after COVID and just went to Mexico by myself. And it was just like it's like small town where it's just like 3,000 people, nothing else. And then all of a sudden I'm in Guadalajara by myself in a city with like a bunch of backpackers. And like I was very naive, and I think maybe I'm very lucky because I feel like I was not as like cautious as I should be. I should have been, I guess. But I feel like definitely if you're careful and you use your common sense and you know don't basically do like illicit things, you're usually fine. But I definitely found that when I first went, I was super naive, and I was like, as I got older and like more of an experienced traveler, I was like, okay, you actually do have to be a little bit careful. It's very interesting.
That's awesome. I want to segue into asking Thomas and Shruthi, because of, you know, the topic of travel and living in other countries. What has it been that took you guys to the places that you've lived? Like Thomas, was it, you mentioned Thailand, you mentioned Guatemala, maybe somewhere else in Latin America.
I lived in Spain as well, 4 years.
Wow.
I think like when you go out of your first, like your main city, you tend to go out of your comfort zone, and it just makes you grow. And the problem and the good thing with that is that as soon as you leave your first comfort zone, you can never go back to it, because as soon as you go back and you see your friends doing the same thing over and over, you know, like getting drunk in the same pub, doing the same thing like for 10 years, you're just like, oh, I want to move forward. I want to build something for myself. I want to, you realize that the world is huge, but in the same time, it's super accessible, especially in our time. So you just need to dare, and then once you're there, I think you never regret having moving out. You know, I never met someone who say, "Oh, I wish I never moved out of my hometown." So yeah, I think that's the big feedback I always had from people and from myself. I mean, now I've been living in like Barcelona, Thailand, Guatemala. Now I'm in Malta. I want to move back in Spain in a few years because I feel it's the best quality of life anywhere in Europe. So at the end of the day, after, like maybe Alberta, I know it's bad weather, no?
Half the year, yeah.
And in Belgium, it's 300 days of rain. So in reality, in Malta, I'm 300 days of sun. So just this is like it's just an upgrade. So maybe I was forced to move out. But for example, now I go in Iceland, and I was talking with my friend from Iceland, and in reality, Iceland looks like a heaven for tourists. But if you think about it, like half of the year they don't have light. Half of the year they have too much light. So if they never moved out of Iceland, they just feel like that's the normality. But for example, I have a friend who went in Malta for a year, and every year he called me and he said, "I'm depressed. I want to be in Malta. I want to be in the sun. I want to be in the sea. I want to swim every day. What I'm doing in this shitty country." And then everyone is like, "Oh, I dream to go in Iceland and discover it."
Yeah.
And in reality, it's not as good as you think,
Yeah,
So
like the
that's
grass is
thing,
greener on the other side type thing.
Yeah.
But once you go out once, you catch the bug.
It's true.
Yeah, I want to just jump in, Shruthi. I know you're going to have a lot to say on this topic too, but the two things I think that stand out to me the most are, I also have never heard someone say, I regret jumping out of my comfort zone or leaving my hometown or whatever the case may be. Like, I personally, I've lived in the US for 25 years. In a month, I'm probably moving to Europe. And I know that I can go back. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing about take that leap, take that kind of step out of your comfort zone, but most likely, your support system, your people that there, you'll be able to go back if you end up not liking it for any reason. And then the second thing is just the point of catching the bug and doing, like, the first time that you do it is the hardest. The first time that you take that leap and, take 6 weeks and go spend it in another place, or go travel alone in a new country for the first time. Like, humans, shout out to Newton, like, we have a lot of inertia, and we just want to stay doing what we're doing. So the first step that takes us far away from that, I think, is the hardest in my experience. But once you do it once, it's like the snowball effect has started. You've started rolling down the hill, and the rest kind of becomes history. Shruthi, what do you think?
No, I think that's like really true. I think especially this like last point about like, I think we as humans, like, it's like hard to make change, but every time you like pick up your life and do it again, it becomes that much easier. I think for like, I think it's like knowing in your brain that you're like, okay, no, I can start over. I know how to make friends in a new place. I know how to like create my own routine again. Like, I can do this. And I think that like gives you a sense of confidence to try it in new places every time. I definitely have not lived in as many places, I think, as Thomas or even Alexa. And but for me, like, in college, I did studied abroad in the UK, but my first like, which is maybe for like 4 or 5 months, but my first like true leaving my comfort zone, I think, was when I graduated and I moved to Norway, and that was my first time really leaving Texas, like for more than like 4 months at a time. I had like never even owned like a down jacket. I didn't even own like the right clothing. And I experienced what Thomas was saying, in that I was not used to darkness and the lack of sunlight. And I remember being like actually really depressed because I had come from Texas where I always had sunshine. Or I would go visit my family in India, which also had only sunshine. And Norway was a type of place that wasn't particularly like, I don't want to say not friendly. I think the term that a lot of people would use is like, they're very friendly, but they can be exclusive. So it felt different than when I used to travel. I traveled to other European cities, like when I was studying abroad. Sure, like, I'd been to Germany, I'd been to Spain, I'd been to Portugal, but like, it felt like when you traveled in those places and you go to hostels, like there was this culture of like, sure, there's travelers, like, let's meet, let's, find a community. But in Norway, it was not the case, I think, because you would go there and even people who were other Europeans found themselves struggling to make friends with Norwegians. I remember there was a saying that like, oh, if you got invited to a Norwegian's home, like, you've made it. And it took people like over a year to ever get invited to somebody's home. But like, I feel like in the States, it's like so normal, like, oh, sure, like, come over for a drink, come over pre-drinks or pre-game. It's very casual, but there, I remember it took me like almost in my last like 2 months, and I finally got invited to dinner, and I was like, oh my God, I've made it in life. But I do think it also taught me that like, okay, I can do this, and I can, and then from there, I moved because of a research fellowship. So my fellowship funding ran out, so I had to come back to the States. But I had met my ex-partner in Norway at the time, who was German, and so I was always tied to Europe. So over the course of like those 4 years, he moved to the US, and then I spent like 4 or 5 months in Germany, and then he would come back, and I feel like we did a lot of back and forth that way. But and every year I kept moving cities. Like, I went back to Texas, then I went to California, then I was in Berlin, and then I was in New York. But I think this is the first time that I like stayed in a place now for like 4 years. And I think it's kind of nice also sometimes, though, to think about setting up roots. So this is sort of my first time feeling like I'm setting roots in a place, truly. I also don't necessarily feel like I'm also half living in another country, which I feel like I was sort of doing with Germany for so long. So it's kind of also nice that way too. I don't know. So I think I'm also in a phase of my life where I'm like excited to build community and stuff, but I'm sure the travel bug will kick in like 6 months again.
Yeah, I feel, just like to go off of that, like the sense of community, I feel like from being like a constant traveler and then finally having like a place to be has been super like beneficial for my personal like well-being and overall like, mental health. I don't know if like just hearing you speak about like this is like the first place that you like are finally setting your roots, Like, although I don't know if I'm like staying here forever, I don't see myself leaving just because I was like traveling a lot and I loved it. But recently, like when I was the last trip I took, I was like, okay, I love this, but like I have nothing to go back to. And it was making me feel very bad. Like I was super anxious, very like, you know, I've done all these things. I've like been everywhere. I've seen all these things, but like all my friends are around the globe, right? Like I just want to be able to, you know, go for a walk in my town and like see a familiar face, like have someone know me, have a routine. And it's like I never thought when I first started traveling, you know, I was on the first time travel high. I thought I would never want stability. And it's like that's the only thing I want right now. Besides, like, of course, I want to do it somewhere I enjoy, but it's super interesting how, you know, we go from wanting to be everywhere to like just wanting to be stable. It's so crazy, but
and maybe we'll like flip back too, you know.
exactly.
To be honest, you should not take it personal with like the Norwegian, because in Europe they have like the worst. Not them, mostly Finnish, but Scandinavian are like one kind of a breed, you know, like even between them, you know, they are not social, you know, like there is this famous image of if you check like a bus stop in Finland or in Scandinavia in general, they will be like 2-3 meters away, even though it's like freezing, and in Belgium everyone will be cramped. Like they're, you know, they don't talk to each other. Even like the signification of small talk does not exist, you know. For example, me, like as I have a business, everybody is doing small talk to me, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't even want to partake in that, but I do it by politeness. But for them, it's not even in their culture to talk about something which is not important. So they will prefer just get their head down and just not talk. And for example, when I was living in Thailand, I met so many Finnish, and let me tell you, there is no exception.
That's so funny. Well, I do feel validated. That's good to hear.
I think women are a bit more, because women needs to be a bit more social, but men, it's catastrophic. Like they will not talk to you.
Interesting. I had the privilege of visiting Denmark and Norway this summer, and it was fascinating to me because you hear on all of the travel blogs and the world rankings that those Scandinavian countries are the happiest in the world. And, you know,
It's not
Denmark
true.
has
Finland has the highest suicide rate in the world, and they're also the highest on the happy list.
like
One does not make the other.
right, to be able to have both of those things, to be considered in general the happiest country, but also extremely high suicide rates and depression rates and things of that nature. I think it almost feels like it's a little all or nothing. And the word that you used earlier, Shruthi, of exclusive, applies here to me, because it's like if you are part of that community, then in Denmark there's a word called hygge, Hygge, and I love the concept of it. I mean, you read about it. There's been books written about it. I bought a sweater that says hygge. It's like the idea of, you know, really, really, really investing in your community and in your closest friends, and just enjoying like simple moments of life, you know, around the fireplace with your family. But if you don't fit into one of those little crowds or groups, especially where it's dark all the time and it's cold, and people don't really stand close to each other at a bus stop, like you could see how that could lead to a lot of sadness and depression.
You know, those stats of the happiest country in the world is just because infrastructure is great, transport is great, university is free, sports subsides are great. So in a way, they have a perfect country. But go, for example, in Brazil, Colombia, infrastructure is bad. At the end of the day, you go in a Latin country, everyone celebrate, everybody dance. Do you think it happens in Finland? And on a list, on a ranking, you will see that the Latin country will be based way lower, you know? There is a joke in Scandinavia, it's in Europe, and they say that it's the happiest country in the world because all the sad people already killed themselves.
Oh my God, that's so dark.
As bad as it sounds, that's dark humor, but go live there and be happy. It's not good.
I will say though, to like Sergio's point earlier, though, I think once you are able to find community in Scandinavia, it can feel very fulfilling. I think in the way that I think I learned how to create, I guess I have to say this, like I think in the US there's this sense of like, oh, to have happiness, like you need to always do things. Like we need to go out to dinner, you need to go here, I think especially in places like New York, right? But I do think in Scandinavia, I feel like it's very much, once you find the community, it's like, how do we just find pleasure even in the darkness? And just like, there's joy in just sitting and watching a movie. And it's okay to binge watch Netflix for 3 hours. Or,
but for example, Shruthi, was this community Norwegian or expat?
No, exactly. I mean, I think I was lucky in that I eventually found some Norwegian friends. But to be very honest, I ended up only becoming friends with other like European immigrants. It's funny because like one of my best friends was actually an Icelandic immigrant, and she also struggled to make Norwegian friends, which I thought was so funny because you'd think like culturally they'd be so similar, but she also struggled to like break into these like Norwegian friend groups. So my closest friends were like German and Dutch and Icelandic and even Danish, and yeah, it was so that sense of exclusivity was still there, and we managed to make a few Norwegian friends. But yeah, no, for the most part, your friends are other expats of some kind, for sure.
Because I feel at the end of the day, Gandhi was saying that if you talk to someone in a language he understands, you talk to his brain. If you talk in his mother tongue, you talk to his heart.
Yeah.
So in reality, in any culture where you don't make the effort to talk in the mother tongue, you will never fit. You will never really touch them. No, in a Scandinavian culture where it's even more exclusive, you will never fit.
Yeah, I agree.
For example, in Spain, even if you will not speak that well Spanish, people would include you. If you begin to speak a bit of Spanish, they will only talk to you in Spanish. But for example, in France, try to talk French to someone and make 3 mistakes, and he will look at you and be like, man, let's speak English, you know? I'm from Belgium, you know, so I make fun of French people, but most of the time, some culture are way more welcoming than others. And for example, I speak Italian. If I go in Italy and I say 3 words and I speak well, the guy is going to begin to only talk to me in Italian. He will love it. He will call his friends. He will invite me everywhere. You say, for example, you know, in French, we have the female and male for a name. Like, for example, a table is female. You will make just the mistake with the French saying like un instead of une. He look at you, he's like, don't talk to me, degenerate.
That's so funny.
That is a really interesting point, though. I think the idea of making an effort to speak in a mother tongue, and I love that saying of speaking to the head versus the heart for someone. Alexa, I'm curious, like, do you speak in Spanish with Costa Rican locals as much as you can? Like,
yeah, like I mean, I've been learning for 4 years now, so yeah, I mean, I don't know what my level would be. It's like technically, but I mean, I'm really conversational. I understand like 75% of everything now. Just because I've been so exposed to Spanish now, it's been hard not to learn it. Like, I mean, I've obviously put effort in, and I have friends that I speak fully to in Spanish. Like, I'm not like able to joke, or sometimes I don't understand jokes, but like, yeah, I communicate in Spanish. But I think people.
do you think it makes a difference, like, for those?
Yeah, like if I didn't speak Spanish, like there's a lot of people who come here and they don't learn the language, and I just don't understand like how do you feel immersed here how do you feel like you belong to the culture if like you go to the, you know, the supermarket and you can't even tell them that you need a bag, right? Like how do you, I don't understand that. Like I even wish I could speak a little bit more, because when my friends are speaking really fast and they're joking and they're using like Costa Rican slang, it's like I want to be able to enter that. But yeah, I just don't understand how you move here and you don't try to learn. I know learning a language is not easy for everyone and it's hard and it takes a lot of time. But I mean, I took lessons online for 1 year and then I just practiced and I'm at this level I'm at now. So I just feel like, yeah, if I didn't speak Spanish, basically overall, I would feel really isolated, I think. Even though most people speak English here because of like the tourism sector, I don't know. And even my students, like I tutor mostly Spanish speakers, and those people are the people I feel the most comfortable teaching, because I can now understand why they're making mistakes. I can understand what they're thinking, right? If it's a beginner learner, how do you explain things to them if they don't speak English? So it kind of gives me a big window career-wise and also like just like personally. Yeah. And I think it's like really crazy too, because my family thinks I'm like amazing for speaking Spanish. They think it's like incredible because I speak English and I speak Spanish, but nobody else in my family speaks anything but English, just because, you know, in Canada and America, it's very common to just speak English. So they think I'm like incredible, but then there's people like Thomas, he speaks, you know, like 5 languages. So it's like, for me, I'm just like an amateur, but it's like, it's funny how
In reality, 6.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Sorry.
insane.
My apologies.
But for example, in Belgium, if you don't speak 3 languages,
like 3 is the starting point.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I also only actually embarrassingly speak 1 language. I'm actually trying to learn Spanish again because I feel like I found it actually to be a thing in New York because I can't speak Spanish. I'm not able to, like, when I was like campaigning and doing community organizing work, it actually was like limiting my ability to like do the work. So if anyone has any recommendations for Spanish classes that they liked online, please let me know, because
that's why your parents did not teach you like one of the many language of India.
honestly, I used to be able to speak Tamil as a kid, but my brother had a speech deficiency when he was younger, and so he didn't really speak. And so it was one of those, he's like 6 years younger than me. So they were, I don't know, the speech pathologist suggested to my parents that they switch to 1 language in the household. But in that process, like, I lost the ability to speak that language, and then they just never went back. I mean, so I can understand it very well. So like fully, like my parents will speak to me and I can understand it, but yeah, I can't speak back, which is really unfortunate. And I think it's something that I want to be able to change in my life. Like, I do think it's limiting to only be able to speak English.
I think the only way to learn a language is the full immersion. For example, if you go into a country and then you feel ashamed of what you say, this experience will have like a profound impact, and you will always remember
The shame will
name.
get to you.
Of course, because for example, in Spanish, if I say sorry to bother you, okay?
Yeah.
You say disculpa de molestarte, okay? But then I translate it in English as sorry to molest you.
Yeah, that's
And then the person was talking to me. I was no. It was her brother was going to come, and then I say, like, you know, I'm going to bother your brother, and I say, I'm going to molest him. Then it sounded really bad, and she said like, what? And then I say, yeah, you know, like me, I meant I wanted to tease him, and then she explained to me what means molest. Then do you think I made this mistake once again in my life? So like those kind of interaction, you know.
That's so
For example,
true.
I was in Napoli, and I wanted like to ask toilet paper, but I didn't know because I was using the Spanish word. I was say papel. Then I tried to Italianize it, and I say papelino. So then she looked at me. Then I had to simulate wiping my ass in a shop. And then he told me, la carta higienica. So do you think do you think I even forget this word one more time in my life? No, I always remember the carta higienica,
Yeah.
the molestar. So I feel like online classes are good, but how many people do Duolingo for years and they are not able to do one conversation?
Yeah, I think I just need to maybe take 6 months and maybe go live somewhere in a Spanish speaking country, and that might be the answer,
Go hang out with Alexa in Costa Rica. That doesn't
Honestly,
sound
that
bad.
might be it.
Yeah, for sure. I think also like I feel like immersion is what helped me, but I definitely like as much as people hate to study, I feel like I don't know, for me,
Yeah.
I like need to see it and read it and like look at the grammar to understand why we say the basics. And then after you kind of know the basic grammar, I think then you can start building the vocabulary.
Yeah.
In English, when you're teaching it, you have to always you have to learn like present simple and present continuous, which is like I am, you are, right? We need to learn these things because how do we know how to talk? So same with like Spanish, you need to learn this. Me personally, like this is just how I learn. But I feel like I needed to learn the grammar and I needed to have someone who knew what they were talking about, like show me this is what we say. And your grammar's not going to be perfect, but I think this is a base of like to start yourself off to like start building that vocabulary. Yeah, you need to be learning and then also be practicing because I was not practicing and my Spanish didn't click until like after I got back from Colombia. It was like, okay, wow, like I actually speak Spanish now, and it was almost just like a switch.
That's
Like,
so cool though, that you were able to like visibly feel that like switch though from like study and practice and be like, oh, I can actually kind of speak this language. Yeah.
So maybe it's study a little bit first and then immerse.
And then go to Costa Rica right now.
Yeah, and then move somewhere. Yeah, and then also you have to be patient. And like a lot of my students, like new students, will come to me like, how much time do I need to learn English? Like how many classes do we need? Or, will I learn fast? And it's like, I cannot tell you that because I don't know how you learn. And also learning is not fast if you're not practicing. And that's the biggest thing. I have a lot of Latino clients in Canada, or students, sorry, and they work in construction sites or something with other Latinos, and all they do is speak Spanish. They're in Canada, but they don't speak English. So it's like you're taking these lessons, but it's like, how are you learning if you're not applying it? And that's like,
let me tell you, in Malta, it's the same. Like every Brazilian will stay with Brazilian. Every Colombian will stay between Colombian. And then they come, for example, in my academy, and they're like I say, like, oh, how long have you been here? The guy say 1 year, and you're like, wow, like, how do you do it? Because at the end of the day, some of the culture, they like to be together. I mean, no, every culture like to meet like a country mate because it brings you back home. And at one point, you just want to feel like a second family, maybe, and it's just easier to express your thought in your mother tongue, as we come back to the same conversation. But at the same time, if you don't make the effort, so for example, some Colombian, when I begin to speak to them in Spanish, they say, oh, it's going to be too easy like, can you just speak English to me? I'm like, okay, because better for them, most of them are here for a language immersion.
Absolutely. That's super cool. I think this language and community conversation has been super awesome. I would like to use kind of the rest of our time, like Shruthi, Thomas, both of y'all, whether it's a BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, correct? Yeah. Whether it's a BJJ studio that you own.
I say like academy because it's big, it's like 7,000 square feet.
Wow.
I have 400 to 500 people. But I do also like digital marketing, for example, like the AI. For me, it's super interesting because that's something I'm integrating to my digital marketing right now, like where all the advertising done through the business is received through a bot, an AI that you train, and basically just replace any assistant that you had in the past. So like the follow-up is done by an AI. No, the problem is that some of my customer, they don't, like Shruthi, she said that about people interacting with each other. No, people don't interact with each other. They just chat GPT themselves as a conversation. So a guy wanted like to register his kids, and he just chat GPT me like 25 lines, 25 sentences, just to look smart and just to say that he was displeased, that he was not informed, that he could not stay in the academy. So what do? You just chat GPT reversed engineer the conversation, and you say, sorry about you're super disappointed. I will never talk like this, So we all go back into a political correctness, super well-formed English, where, for example, a written conversation will never happen like this, Basically, before we will say, hey, sorry to disappoint you, but to not have told you that you could not stay in the same time as your kids. Or I would have answered ironically saying, hey, maybe it's the time for your son to entertain and have a bit of me time, and you're not supposed to watch it. But no, I'm just going to chat GPT it, That's sad world.
Well, it's also really, like, you bring up a really good point that it actually almost creates this like standard form of speaking that becomes almost like homogenous, And it's actually so true, because I think one of the things that I was working on is that like a lot of these large language models are also trained on a very particular type of English, and it's actually causing a lot more harm, and that we're actually erasing dialects, slang, styles of speaking. This is like just within the US, like, and then imagine if we like look at it in a more broader scale across the world, and we add in like how English is spoken in other countries. And it's sort of the idea is like now this like these ChatGPT has almost kind of created this like standard form, and now people are communicating and only utilizing this form, and that's also seen now as the correct form. But it's a sort of this like almost like this value judgment that this is the right way to speak, when in reality, who's deciding that, right?
But
and I think
it's almost too obvious, no? When you see the unleash, unlock your potential, it's just, you will never say that in real life.
Well, right. And it's like, it's that now in your example, right, when you're interacting maybe with a client, that client may have their own style of speaking English, and then you have your own style of speaking, and then you'd almost actually have a much more personalized conversation. But in the way that you described it, like you're both actually like using ChatGPT to speak to each other, and you're actually speaking in a way that's like in a different form of English, actually, in some ways.
Yeah.
Right? A different style that maybe would be different from your personal style, I think.
Yeah.
Because after now you can prompt it to talk on a more
like casual or like less formal.
Yes.
But even then, I would argue that it's still not trained on enough data that is representative of all the different styles of speaking. Like, I mean, there was this whole study that was done. It's like, a very specific type of English spoke in a specific type of part of New York. Like, I mean, I think New York is a good example because it's like a huge mosh pit, right, of so many cultures. And there's like so many variations. Like there's like a New York style of speaking Spanish. Like it's like interesting. But a lot of those dialects are being kind of passed over for. And these models are not trained because it's so small, right? Or we talk about like dialects in India, for example, where you have, I think we have so many languages in India, right? And it's like
there's
a lot
so
of
many
things are
languages in
being
India.
like erased because it's like there's just not enough data. The models aren't being trained on it, and it's almost being erased from our like general view of like what is considered an acceptable type of language. But anyway, that's this whole separate conversation. But
No, like it's a separate conversation, but I think the last like 5 or 7 minutes have been such a cool thread between Thomas running his own business, his own academy. Like it's jiu-jitsu, right? Like it's not related to technology or computers on the surface, but obviously like any business grows and it needs marketing, it needs reach, it needs communication with clients. And all of a sudden now you're talking about what Shruthi does. And then we're talking about languages and what Alexa does. Like it has been such a cool connection of
in reality, my background is marketing, and why I grew so much the academy, because it could stay like a brick and mortar business. Why the academy grew so much is because I had like this knowledge, because I come from selling product on Amazon. That's my first That's my first job, let's say.
Yeah, so that skill is maybe even more important than your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teaching
and
abilities.
someone could be bad at what they do, but if they have great marketing, they would
That's
just
so
get
real.
customers, you know?
So real.
That's fascinating. Shruthi, is there anything else like the topic of AI and these LLMs becoming very homogenous and maybe taking away, the creativity or idiosyncrasies of like speaking? What else is top of mind for you in your work and your research about, things that we should be aware of with the effects of growing AI usage and availability? But do you have a number one thing that you always talk about or that you care about a lot?
Well, okay, there's like two things that maybe are top of mind. And I think the first thing that's like maybe especially top of mind for me in this moment is this idea around like accessibility and digital inclusion. And I think it's sort of interesting because it's not considered like the sexy part of AI ethics, but I think the reality is that like we're building this technology and we're actually just like increasing and further this like class divide, I think. And then we call it like the digital divide or like digital inequality, right? Now we have people who are able to use technology, are being trained in it. We're seeing massive amounts of wealth being generated, right? For certain types of people. And I think what we're also seeing is there's a lot of people who still do not have access to internet, right? We still have people who are not being trained in technology. And it's like if you're now unable to participate in the digital economy, your skills or maybe your jobs are being taken over, right? Maybe you're no longer have the skills that you maybe need to participate. And so you're seeing this divide growing in a way that like has exponentially increased, I think, at least personally in the past like 10 years. And it's hard because it's like, how do you work to like, reduce that divide, right? We can look at upskilling people, right? We can think about, okay, how do we take some of those jobs that have been replaced, to your point about like, we used to have people doing customer service and like managing requests, but now they're being replaced by bots. Okay, what do we do? How do we make sure people still have jobs and jobs that are also sustainable, right? But at the same time, how do we also ensure that the technologies that we're just building and building and building aren't also making this like full circle where they're actually harming the people in other ways? And I think that's the other area that I'm really interested in is like this idea around like bias and fairness. And so these technologies are growing, they're growing at such a massive rate. But they're sort of doing it in a way that's also just increasing or furthering existing discrimination in society today. And so like what I mean by that is a good example is if you think about like financial services and like loans. So you have a model that's going to determine if somebody's going to get a loan or not. Yes, human judgment in the past would have been flawed. We have our internal biases, yes. But now we're seeing situations where I might be a single mom living in the South Bronx, or I might be a wealthier man living in the Upper East Side. I apply for a loan. The single mother is almost always going to get declined or rejected from the loan based on sort of vague criteria of what is considered like credit worthiness. It's sort of interesting because they're now not only is this maybe this woman who might already have a job that was being replaced by AI, she's now being rejected from loans. She's being rejected from the financial system. She's not able to get credit. Maybe she's going to the grocery store and her card is being, disproportionately declined at a faster rate than somebody else living in another part of the city. That's kind of what I'm thinking about right now specifically is like, how do we kind of prevent or at least work towards reducing these like negative, unfair effects of technology on people in a way that's like still making sure that people are able to participate in this new economy.
But Shruthi, sorry to be controversial, but
no,
do you
please
think
do.
Do you think it's education or it's access to those tools? Because at the actual time, everyone can make money on internet. All the information is on YouTube. Everyone could drop ship, make ads.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There is a 14 years old in India that does your job better than you. You know?
Yeah.
And this guy goes on Fiverr, he goes on Upwork, and he can make money as well, So
True.
is it education, and is it like, for example, other tools? And when I say tools, is it like social network? For example, the single mom, right? If she spends her time on Instagram and Facebook and just is losing time, right? is it more a matter of financial education than access to financial tools that could make her
Yeah.
more wealthy? Because at the end of the day, unfairness will always exist in the world, you know?
Well, I think yes, I agree with you that I think we are in an age where we have like unprecedented access to like different types of income and different types of opportunities that have been afforded by the internet, right? But I also think there's still a degree of access because of internet access. Like I think it's like it's I know it sounds like very fundamental, but it's true. Like even in the States, in the United States, right? I was, I was doing a lot of work in a lot of public housing units this year, and people are still struggling to have internet access. And I was talking to a couple of families, and they're like, well, my kid is in school, but now all school has been transitioned to remote learning, or at least after COVID, it's been hybrid. But I don't even have like a laptop at home. And so my kid has to go every day to the library. But the library closes at like 6 p.m. And so we're still having very, very like fundamental barriers to adoption that I think is preventing people from truly participating, right? And then you talk about, okay, then do they have a
What's the
device?
percentage of internet access in the
Ooh, that's
States?
a good idea. I don't know if I have
I
the
mean,
number off the top
if
of
you
my
have a
head.
phone, you know?
I don't have the number on top of my head, but I do know that it's like internet access, but it's also device access. And it's also a difference between having like internet access in your home versus also cellular and mobile access, which could prevent you, like you may have internet in your home, but you don't necessarily maybe have a smartphone with a lot of data. Or you maybe just have enough data to, text and make calls, but not enough data to really be active on like Instagram, right? Or make TikToks.
Yeah.
So it's like there are like all these like there's like layers to it, and I totally agree. I think a lot of it is education, but I think a lot of people in this like AI hype do forget that a lot of it actually just comes down to there's a lot of like core barriers to access. I think still.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, Shruti, the other point that you made that I found pretty fascinating was like maybe before there used to be a human element that would give that single mom a chance or
Yeah.
not depreciate the car as fast. Whereas now that a lot of that is done automatically, the kind of opportunities for, an opportunity are maybe getting washed away a little bit. So
I mean, you saw the news, the guy who got killed in New York was like the CEO of a health insurance, which used AI to decline claims. That's exactly what you're talking about,
Exactly. And it's like, what's really funny is that actually a lot of companies, health insurance companies included, and financial institutions will claim they're actually increasing inclusion efforts. Like they'll claim we're increasing financial inclusion, or we're increasing access to healthcare by saying no, but like look, by using technology, we're being less biased. We're actually now able to approve people for loans or for credit cards by using other categories, not just like credit history, but maybe things like spending patterns or where they live and these other kind of nebulous, traits. But in reality, you're actually furthering the exclusion. But it's funny because from a marketing standpoint, they actually use a lot of like inclusion narrative, which I find kind of
yeah, because in reality, you're almost like defining where that line is.
Exactly.
As opposed to being able to like, be a little more case by case and take this factor, which for the AI model is going to immediately exclude you, and understand it from a more human side, maybe approve that claim as a health insurance company as opposed to automatically declining it. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So cool. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I think it could go on for hours. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. I learned a ton. I think we found a really cool way to touch on what all of us are passionate about and what all of us do. So thank you so much. Thank you for being part of Uncommon Pod number 2 and for, the people community in general. And I'm excited to see, where we go moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Sergio.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Great meeting you, Thomas and Alexa.
Super fun. It was nice meeting everyone.